Welcome to Transformational Pathways, a podcast created by Toastmasters District 46 in the greater New York area, where we share conversations from influencers within the Toastmasters community and people whose lives have positively transformed by walking down the Toastmasters path. Whether you're just getting started in your career, have had recent career changes, or you're navigating different languages, we're here to help you build confidence by discovering new tools, overcoming your fears to find your voice, and engaging in a thriving community. Enjoy today's episode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Toastmasters District 46 Transformational Pathways podcast. I am your host, Scott Mason, and walking the pathway with us today is Angelika Kerzakova. Angelika is an administrator with a home care agency for senior citizens and has been there for about 5 years. She's also immediate past president of the Gray Bar Toastmasters, and that's one of the oldest and original legacy Toastmasters in all of New York City. So that's really a group to be proud of being a member of. She is an avid walker here in New York City, and in the days in which this is recorded, which happened to be in early 2022 during the pandemic years, that's probably all that she could do. Well, I'm glad you enjoy doing that. And she is a huge fan of self-improvement and personal transformation. And so the transformational pathways are a wonderful place to be walking with Angelika. Angelika, welcome to the show.
Good evening, Scott. Thank you so much for having me.
It is so good to have you. Angelika, we talked a little bit about your background and your life before the show. Is it true what a little birdie told me, that you had your own podcast in another era of your life?
I did. I actually did. My friend and I, we were recording a podcast in Russian.
I love it.
For about a year or so, and she's back in Russia. I am here, so we would connect over the phone usually, but then we decided to turn that into a podcast to be able to connect maybe to mostly, I think, at least I personally did not really have a huge agenda for the podcast. I just wanted to be able to share my thoughts and for other people to hear them. And of course, most of our listeners were our friends, our ex-colleagues, immediate colleagues, and our friends and family. So it was a great way to connect to a friend of mine who I haven't been able to see in person for some time, and to just discuss what we've been going through in life.
I love it. And I wanted to get right into that because one of the wonderful things about Toastmasters, in District 46 in particular, is that we have a podcast club. It's called Podcast Pioneers. And it is perfect for people that are looking to explore podcasting. The podcasts that those members have been moving towards, as well as this podcast, are the dominant form of podcast that is out there right now, which is the interview podcast. And everyone from Joe Rogan to Hillary Clinton has experimented or actually moved into that sort of podcasting as an alternative to television or radio or other forms of communication. But it's important to understand that there are multiple types of podcasts out there and that they exist for a number of different purposes. For instance, there are solo podcasts where people just sit there and talk. And then there are podcasts that are like yours. And one of the things that's interesting that you said that this hits on is that podcasting as a communication mode can serve a number of different purposes. It sounds like the purpose that yours had was quite distinct from, for instance, this podcast, which is to evangelize around Toastmasters and District 46 in particular, or some other podcasts exist purely to generate sales for the companies that run the podcast. Some are kind of news outlets or just places for people to vent. But it sounds like, based on the audience that you had and the experience that you turned your podcast into with your friend, that the purpose and objective of it was a little bit different. Talk to us a little bit about what that podcast journey looked like for you, how it impacted you, and what did it do with regards to your relationship with that friend of yours, as well as anyone who might have been listening?
The idea initially, to be honest, was from my friend. And she is actually the one, I remember she was visiting me here in New York back in 2017. And we were walking, or actually maybe we were on a phone call. And I remember I was going to a event in the city, something about having your voice. And I didn't read through the description of what the event was about. And I was telling her, well, I'm going to this event about voice. I'm assuming they're going to do some practice on your vocal cords and all that. And the event turned out to be about having your voice in a, not in a literal literal meaning, right? I'm sorry, sometimes I might be confused with English words, but more about being heard, having your opinion be heard, and expressing your voice in terms of, if you have something to say it, and the ways that you can communicate to people. And I was describing that to my friend Daria, and she's like, so it seems like you want to be heard. And that's still that idea. Oh, I want to be heard. I want to be able to communicate my ideas, my messages. That really stuck with me. And then I think about 2 years after that, she and I decided to do the podcast. And that was a way to actually be heard, or not necessarily be heard. It was a way to express myself. I don't know if I will be heard, but at least I will speak.
Well, it sounds like you got some sort of audience out of it, and so it sounds like you actually were heard by somebody at least.
Right, we definitely were, and we definitely received some feedback from friends, from people we knew on Instagram, or from friends of friends, people who we didn't know in person, but through other people. And it was definitely an experience of sharing the different problems. And she and I, at that point, we were working with a therapist, different types of therapy, and just sharing what issues are coming up in our lives, how we are dealing with that it's okay. And right now, for example, in Russia, therapy, if you go to a therapy, it's still, I think, 70% of people would think, oh, you must be sick, or people do not really would go to therapy. It's not that common. So we were trying to kind of educate, maybe in a way that we can, that, you know what, it's not for sick people. It's, most of us would need someone who can educate us on our emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. And sometimes the people that are most resistant to therapy
might really need that.
And by the way, what you're talking about, look, we're just keeping it real here. One of the things that you're talking about is the power of communication to heal or to have a transformative effect with regards to events that may have been traumatic for us or that we might have struggled to deal with. Podcasting as an emerging form of communication is one area where developing and building on and exercising these communication skills can really help us overcome challenges that we've had. Therapy is another form of communication. I mean, therapy is mostly talking.
Yeah, exactly.
So you are, as has been sort of embedded in this conversation, not originally from New York City. Is that true?
That is correct. I am calling myself a New Yorker for the last 5 years. It's going to be 5 years, January 17th.
Now, before we get into a little bit of your background, are you going to be a New Yorker forever? That's what I really want to know. That's what defines a true New Yorker, is if they say they're going to stay.
Well, I think a true New Yorker is in the soul, so I will definitely be a true New Yorker forever. I don't know in terms of physically being here. I try not to use the words forever because I have been moving around, and usually it's like every 5, 6, 7 years I'm in new cities. So I cannot tell you for 100% that I will physically be here, but in my soul, I'm a forever New Yorker.
Well, that's good enough for us. And hey, look, District 46 has clubs that have members from all over the world, so we're going to find a way to keep you here one way or another. Where are you from originally? You said Russia, right?
I am from Russia. I'm from a small town. It's called Cheboksary. It's for Russia. It's tiny. It's about 500,000 people. Whenever I say,
I'm glad you qualified.
I know, but sometimes you look at Norway. Oh, the second largest city in Norway is 250,000 people. I'm like, wait, that's tiny. So, all is relative, as you say, but I am from a small town in Russia, and it's about 400 miles to the southeast, but still quite close to Moscow.
Gotcha. And tell us what it was like growing up there. I've never been to Russia. I'm sure a lot of folks who are listening to this or watching it only imagine what it would be like in a Russian town. They may imagine some Siberian bleak thing, or they might have stereotypes in their mind about communist, brutalist architecture everywhere. What was it really like?
Well, to be honest, some parts, I live in Brooklyn now, and some parts of Brooklyn where you have like this high rises, but not modern high rises, but the like 1970s high rises. That really reminds me of Russia. That really, like, those types is just like one and the same type of building.
Right.
A block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks of those buildings. I was like, it feels like I'm home. So that's, that, as you said, Soviet architecture was more about like, everyone is the same. We're all equal. Everyone has to be the same. We had, I remember, like when I was growing up, when I was little, we still had shortage of everything. And whenever you could buy something, you would buy as much as you can and then distribute it between your friends and family. Yeah. So I remember once my mom got a hold of a furniture set, and she bought like 7 of those, and then all my family had the same furniture set. Whenever you go, it's like, it's exactly the same. Yeah. Yes, exactly the same. So that was Russia at that time, where everything is the same. Whenever, even we have this old movie, which is still quite popular in New Year's. They show it on December 31st, usually around the New Year's time. And the plot of it is that the person is in one city, but he has the address. So basically, like, he would have the same street names, the same apartments, and he was drunk and got on a train to Moscow, and he didn't realize that. He thought he was still in St. Petersburg. He goes to his address, he comes into his apartment, he opens the door with his key because it's still the same, and he's like, well, it's my apartment, and then it's based on that, but it was all the same. Yes.
Amazing. Now, how did you end up coming to the United States?
Again, the story goes back to my childhood. When I was 9, I remember I started to learn English. And my teacher, she was a beautiful teacher. Like, she was really a meant-to-be teacher. And she sits us down and says, well, girls, we'll start to learn English. And when you can speak properly, in about 5 years, I'll take you to the United States.
Wow.
Yes, I want to do
nice
that.
Teacher.
And I remember, it's like, and that's it. I was sold. And the funny thing is that myself and my classmate, Olga. We were friends in school. We would, the next day, the following day after that English class, we are walking to school and she's like, well, you know what? I really want to go to America. I have already actually started to pack my luggage. I'm like, wait, it's a little bit too soon. She said in 5 years, like, wait a little bit. But now, myself and that person, Olga, we are the two of us living in the United States. So that teacher, she was kind of, I don't know, she really made a huge impact on my life.
That's actually kind of a heartwarming story. And I've got to say this about Olga. Like a true Toastmaster, she was prepared.
She was prepared.
Wow. Get her to be a member of one of our clubs if she's not already. So when did you come here and how did that come about? And talk to us a little bit about your experience coming here, coming from a quote-unquote small town.
Right. Well, before I moved here, I was living in Moscow, and I had a career. I was working in a huge international company which owned shopping centers in Russia and around the world. So,
interesting.
And I remember we had a business trip, and it was in London, where I was sitting there, and I was like, I think it's time to move. And 6 months after, I've decided to take sabbatical. I learned the word after I already moved here. I didn't know, I was like, I'll just take a year off and go traveling. And I decided to start with the US, and just took a year off, came here, and that's it. Kind of decided not to continue the journey. I really found my home.
Let's talk about this for a second. I came from a small town into New York City too, but I had a destination, and that destination, which was law school, helped me figure out where to live and all of that sort. You just came here and you didn't know anyone, and you weren't doing anything. You just sat down and you got on the subway and ended up in Brooklyn. Next thing you know, you were living somewhere. What happened? Come on.
Well, I was still about to. I wanted to do a eat, pray, love year, I would say. So, but when I figured it out already when I got here to New York. And I thought that I was going to do an Eat, Pray, Love year, and I was supposed to fly off to Paris and spend the summer in Paris, and then to go to Bali for the end of the year, and then return to Moscow. But to be honest, just about 2 days, I was supposed to have my flight on Sunday, and on Friday morning, I wake up and I cannot leave. I should stay, and I stayed, and I'm really thankful to my family. My mom and my sister were here at that time. We were supposed to fly off together. And I remember I woke up that morning and I'm starting to get dressed, and I just started to cry. And my mom was like, what's happening? You know what, Mom, I think I need to stay. She's like, well, if you need to stay, then stay and then figure it out. So that's a huge, huge, huge support system that I have. That's really got me here, I would say.
Angelika, I love your mother. I don't even know her.
I know.
Angelika's mom, if you're watching or listening, I love you. That's a wonderful story. You're a good mother.
She's a wonderful mother. She's going to turn 16 next month.
16?
60.
Oh, 60.
Honestly, she feels like she's 16.
Well, that's all there. I would have said, this is going to be the best podcast ever if your mom was 16 years old. But we'll move that down some. We'll have that conversation offline. So you were in Brooklyn when that happened. Is that correct, or did you move to Brooklyn since?
I moved to Brooklyn since,
And so how did you find a job? Where'd you end up? Did you go directly from being in that situation to working for the home care agency that you're at now, or what?
Yes. So basically, it's my friend, a friend of a friend introduced me to my current company, and
And bam, there you are. Now, how did you end up with Toastmasters? There's got to be a story there. I want to hear.
There is a story there.
My ears are ringing.
Right. I joined Toastmasters in spring 2019. In November 18, I attended a Tony Robbins event in New Jersey, New York. And I remember about 5 different people told me, "Oh, you should try Toastmasters. You should try Toastmasters." I had no idea what that was, but I wrote it down that, okay, I'll find out what Toastmasters is. And then I read about it, sounded interesting. I never did anything about it, so I was like just sitting somewhere in my notes. And once, I think it was March, or maybe early April, it doesn't really matter. And it was an early evening at work, not much to do. It wasn't too busy. So I was looking for something to do. I didn't have any plans. And I remembered about Toastmasters. And I went on meetup.com, see if they have any events. Oh, I think I tried searching for Toastmasters Club before, but the ones that I emailed to see if I can attend, they were 2 corporate clubs. I think one was one bank and some university, so it wasn't an open attendance. And that night I was looking for something for some Toastmasters, and I found one group that was meeting Midtown on 35th Street. Perfect timing, perfect location. So I ended up going there, and that was it. I was sold. I really loved it. Ended up being Gray Bar Toastmasters, and I loved the atmosphere. As you said, there are many clubs which have people from all different places. That's the story of Gray Bar. We have our members are from myself, like Russian, American, Indian, Austrian, French, Georgian. We have all the different nationalities. We have all the different age groups. One of our members, I think I don't know, to be honest, Carl, I think he's 80 or 90 years old. He was in Vietnam War, and he is there in Toastmasters and still doing it on Zoom, which is really inspiring.
I love it.
So
wow.
Toastmasters is the second family here.
Again, this is a theme, and those who listen to or watch this podcast regularly have heard this over and over again. They've heard me comment about it, which is that sense of community that you get. It really is a family atmosphere, and it seems to attract people, and especially those that stay with it for a while, which is fortunately a lot of people, that are people who are fundamentally positive, or who are believing in encouraging or in human possibility. You went to a Tony Robbins seminar, and we mentioned during the intro to the show that you're into personal improvement. Talk to me a little bit about any parallels that you see between the Toastmasters process and being a Toastmaster and the general self-improvement and self-development journey that you or other people that you know might have been on. Because I suspect that there is a overlap. Hey, I don't just suspect. I professionally am in the personal improvement space, so I can attest. Right? There's a lot going on there. So talk to me and talk to us a little bit about it from your perspective.
I think for me also, Toastmasters is a great way to process your experience. When you work on a speech, and usually you would choose a subject that's dear to you, that you relate to. Sometimes even saying, even the icebreaker, when you need to introduce yourself, it is such a great tool to actually sit down and say, hey, how do I want to be seen? I'm going to be standing in front of this group of people who I have no idea about and who don't know me. What am I? Who am I? What's important to me? What are my values? What do I want to tell people about myself? So for me, every speech, every topic that I've presented at Toastmasters is a way to relive your experiences and to kind of underline, okay, what did I learn from them, or how did that influence me as a person?
It almost sounds like you are saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this is what I'm hearing, listening to that, is that the speech-making process that's embedded into the Toastmasters educational curriculum is a way to examine, reframe, and process the events in our lives if we choose to make it so.
Absolutely. And to be honest, it's the first time that I think about it this way, because usually when I would say to someone about Toastmasters, I would speak about how you can become more confident in front of public, how you can improve your speaking. But right now, when you and I have this conversation, that's when I realized that it's actually a lot also about the speech writing process. And especially for me, I've never done something about like scientific topics or something that's a little boring to me. So all my speeches have always been about myself, about my experiences, what's interesting for me, and that's really I'm realizing now that is really a not self-discovery process, but more of like when you make different conclusions. Oh, that's what influenced me, and that's, to be honest, it's one of the parts that I love about the Toastmasters journey. Not just being there speaking, but actually working on your speech as well.
Do you feel, sort of listening to you and thinking about your words, that process and that impact that the speech making and speech crafting and then speech delivery process or way that the Toastmasters has for its members has anything to do with why the sense of community within clubs is so powerful?
I think it definitely plays a huge role, because you become like a family. Your club, you become like a family because you bring I don't know about other people, I bring some topics that are very vulnerable sometimes. And that being that open or being that transparent, sometimes it may not be about openness, it's about being transparent for this little part of yourself that gives you that sense of closeness and community, for sure.
Vulnerability. There's the vulnerability that can come from sharing things about yourself in the speech. And then there's the vulnerability that can come from standing up there and delivering the speech and not knowing what's going to happen. Irrespective of what you say, the act of standing up or being on a Zoom call and giving a prepared speech, there's this uncertainty in it and this vulnerability or this potential, there's this risk that is inherent in doing that. Have you ever had issues with that? And do you view that as part of the self-development journey? Do you view that as anything that has presented any sort of transformational challenge for you or transformational opportunity?
Oh, it has definitely been a journey for me. I remember, I'll go back again to my childhood when I don't know how it happens in the US, but in Russia, for example, when we had a literature class, we would recite a poem and we had to come in front of the whole class, stand in front of the class and recite the poem, yes. And I remember my knees were shaking, my hands, my palms would be all sweaty, my voice would be trembling. And that I kind of, as I was growing up, going through the university years, and then by training, I'm also a teacher. So having to stand in front of a class and teach, I was able to work on that. But again, for example, in my corporate world, corporate years in Moscow, whenever I had to speak in front of big bosses, I would feel again my voice shaking and trembling and that nervousness. So that being able to come with that to Toastmasters and to actually say, hey, you know, that's what I want to be working on, or even before each speech in the beginning, especially when you would say to your evaluator, hey, can you please look at the science of that? You kind of tell the person already up front that, oh, I'm very weak at that. So being that open about your weak spots, that's the part, the difficult part. But when you receive the support of a person, even of an evaluator, saying understandingly that, oh, I've been through that, I know what that feels like, I got you. And that gives you that strength and builds up the strength.
How has being a Toastmaster impacted your professional life, if at all?
It's hard for me to judge, to be honest, right now with my current experience, because the home care agency that I work for right now, we are a small company, and we are all friends. So I don't have that big pressure of speaking, oh, I have to speak in front of, like whatever was the CEO, the world CEO. So you don't have that pressure. But I think it still gives the confidence, the overall confidence in your in my communication, or the ability to say, hey, this might be my weak spot, so please, help me get better. So that, not necessarily the speaking part, the presenting part, but the more, again, the self-improvement part of the Toastmasters definitely transforms into the personal and professional life.
Yeah, I love it. Let me ask you this. Even though your mom is only 16, you are of a generation that is up and coming in the work world. You're up and coming in the world. Tomorrow, the future is yours. There are people, particularly here in the United States, who may not really understand the value of Toastmasters to them. They may not say, they might not look at it and say, well, what's in it for me? I can go on Instagram and do a live show, or I can do anything I want to on TikTok and say this, that, and the other. So why should I go to Toastmasters and talk even more? I can say whatever I want to, anytime I want to, everywhere in the whole world, and everyone will listen, and my personal opinion will be out there forever, and I've got no problem with that. What would you say to someone like that?
Well, I do hope we will go back to in-person meetings soon.
Yeah,
because of course, I think even with Toastmasters, being in front of a camera is so much easier. It's absolutely different feeling.
Yeah.
But yes, you can start on your Instagram, have your lives, and but it's still the interaction or the experience you have standing actually physically in front of other live people. That's something that cannot be mimicked, I would say, by Instagram, by by the phones we have, the social media, it's not the same. It's definitely not the same. And the ability to be able, and for some it might not be a big deal. And it's great if someone feels very confident speaking in front of anyone else, no matter how huge the crowd is.
Right.
But it's just for me, and I think still there are so many people for who it is a problem, not necessarily a problem, for who it is a challenge, I would say, or something that they really want to work on. And yes, if it's something that's difficult for you, you can start with Instagram, but going out there into real life and talking in front of the real people, that's a whole different level.
If you could say one thing that has changed about you because of being a Toastmaster, what would that thing be?
That's an interesting question. I think what's the best word for that? The sense of community.
Yeah.
That really, Gray Bar is, as you mentioned, as we said, it's one of the oldest bars in New York City. It was founded in 1954. We have members who have been members of Gray Bar for 30 years.
Amazing.
And that's something that inspires me so much. And that they have been, when they talk about what they have been through, like their whole lives were with Toastmasters, with Gray Bar. And sometimes they would still be members, but maybe attend even once a year or twice a year, but still be members of Gray Bar. That inspires me so much that, they are there and they're still active participants. They are our coaches inside the club. And that's something that's, it's not a paid job. You're not getting anything for it. It's you contribute your time, you contribute your money, you contribute, we meet every 2 weeks. So you contribute 3 to 4 hours of your week. Take it away from your family, take it away from your personal life, from your professional life, and you are there. So that sense of contribution and community, that's something that I think I've learned a lot thanks to Toastmasters.
And that is a powerful thing to learn.
Absolutely.
And Angelika, Toastmasters is where leaders are made. Tell us about one speaker and one leader that you admire and why. And they don't have to be the same person, by the way.
Do they have to be Toastmasters?
Nope.
Okay. Leader is Ingvar Kamprad. He is the founder of IKEA. That's the company I worked for in Russia. And I loved that something still stays with me. First, lead by example. Behave in the way that you want others to be, or be the way that you want others to be, the world around you to be. And another lesson that was always promoted at IKEA is never be afraid to make mistakes. That's how we learn. So that's my leadership example. And what was the second person?
A speaker.
A speaker. I think Tony Robbins is a very inspiring speaker. I was amazed on how he could be on stage for 12 hours non-stop and still have that energy and power in him still. He is definitely an inspirational speaker.
It's hard to imagine anyone alive outside of maybe the most charismatic politicians that there are, that can bring that level of energy into a room and are operating at that unbelievable level. I want to just briefly go back to what you said about your favorite leader, the head of IKEA. One of the things that we haven't really touched on in this podcast in depth is this idea of leadership and mistakes. Now, I'll keep it real with you and anyone listening. Some, all, of the large organizational jobs that I worked in were dominantly managed by people that did not allow mistakes. Mistakes, at least as I experienced them, were things to be avoided at all costs and were rewarded with severe consequences. And one of the things that really impacted me about Toastmasters that I didn't realize until you just said this was it was the first place I'd ever been to where people could make mistakes outside of a company that I owned myself. And of course, I allowed myself to make all the mistakes in the world. But in terms of a larger organization, mistakes could happen. And that was revelatory for me. Do you see any parallel between your admiration for that facet of working at IKEA and your Toastmasters experience?
I think definitely that openness to, for me, like making a mistake and acknowledging a mistake, and then you know, it's a part of being vulnerable. Yeah, where we all say, "Hey, we're human," and yes, of course, sometimes in a corporate world, depending on the organization, it could cost lots of money, but at the end, it's really money. But that it's for me, it's a lot about vulnerability and just being human.
I love it. I love it. Angelika, it has been great having you on the show. And that was, by the way, a beautiful way to close out our conversation. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your story, your wisdom, and your insight. Now, for those of you who, it was truly a pleasure. For those of you who are listening or watching, if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review or a comment. And don't forget to follow District 46 on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And if you're new to Toastmasters, check out our website at toastmasters46.org. That's toastmasters46.org to learn more about us or visit one of our clubs and to meet lots of wonderful people like Angelika, because Toastmasters is where leaders are made.
Thank you so much for joining us on Transformational Pathways. If you enjoyed today's episode or got anything out of it, please rate, review, and subscribe. And if you're interested in learning more about Toastmasters District 46, check out the link in the show notes below.